You kids want to learn about some conspiracies? The year is 2024, and the landscape of online discourse is, hell. And among the hundreds of reasons why people act the way they do now, an extremely large fuel source of the outraged and the jaded has become the endless, infinite list of conspiracy theories that have filled the world. Now, this isn't a new concept. This isn't some phase that people are just going through. The ideas of conspiracies that exist hidden from the eyes of everyday people have been a part of human history forever. Like, we as a species are all naturally curious, instinctively wanting to solve problems in our heads because, well, it's just how our brains are programmed. So naturally, when things around us don't make sense, the dots don't add up and we can see or hear things that we can't explain, we ask questions. We point fingers and dig for deeper meanings and hidden information. And that's kind of become a major part of American culture, and largely the world. There's always been big ones that are well documented. Was the moon landing real? Do aliens, the Loch Ness Monster, or Bigfoot exist? Did Bush do 9/11? Like, some of these are just normal everyday parts of life itself that you don't really think about the fact that they are technically conspiracies. Things that aren't 100% confirmed proven and are just people asking broad questions, even if we can guess that some of them are probably true. There's tons of things about the world that we're never told, that are hidden from us, and instead of using them to fight each other, we should be working to find the real truths that are at the core, whether they were as deep as we all thought, or if the puddle was as shallow as we were told. But what would we do if all of them were true? Like real-ass, deep-state, long-standing theories that have lit the fires under people for decades, and it turning out that almost every single one of them was not only legit, but there was a deeper connecting thread behind all of them. A prophetic figure that was at the center of almost every single major historical event throughout time. Its legacy creating an endless conspiracy with no answers and controlling both the people who try to seek it out, and seemingly fate itself. So today, we're gonna be diving into Billy Bat, a manga that not only finds a way to write in almost every single conspiracy theory of the last few thousand years, but ties them all together under a large set of wings that fuels the wind of future generations, taking some of the biggest historical events in the lifespan of our Earth and setting them at the feet of a cartoon drawing of a bat. So before we talk about what the hell Billy Bat is, let's talk about the manga itself and the duo behind it, Naoki Urasawa and Takashi Nagasaki. And, like I said in my last video, my ass got laid off after working for 10 years at the same job, so like, comment, sub, hit the Patreon, and help keep my ass fed and not homeless for now. I'll metaphorically love you forever. Billy Bat started its run in 2008, the magazine Morning KC by Kodansha printing the series for 8 years, getting 20 total volumes before ending on August 18th, 2016. As of now, in the current year 2024, the series has no form of official English release, and honestly probably never will for reasons that we're gonna talk about later. So for this one, you'll have to read scans that vary in quality. Shout out to the multiple groups that put in the work so we can read this, and if you see that manga stream logo, just ignore it. I know in the current era some people have a vicious hatred for scans, but as long as a series has no official release for me to buy, I do what I can. Also, I bought the Japanese volume, so fuck you, I'll read it however I want. Like I had just mentioned, the series was created by Naoki Urasawa and Takashi Nagasaki. Now, Urasawa, there's not much I can say that you probably won't know if you're watching this video. The legendary creator of some of the most famous manga in the world, him being known for series like Monster, 20th Century Boys, Pluto, Happy, Yawara, tons of short stories and single volume one-shots. When you're getting people into anime that aren't really used to the medium, I think the 4 easiest introductions are Full Metal, Bebop, Death Note, and Monster. Like, there's not much else to add here other than he's as famous as he is for a reason. Fucking Google it if you want more. But the lesser known thing about Urasawa that I feel like not as many people talk about is for a large chunk of his career, going back to the 80s and into the 2010s, is that he had a co-author, a former editor that had worked with Urasawa on Master Keaton, Monster, 20th Century Boys, Pluto, and now here again with Billy Bat. And that is Takashi Nagasaki. A former editor-in-chief for Shogakukan, Nagasaki has been involved with the manga world for over 40 years, editing for series like Golgo 13 back in the day and going on to help tons of artists in his timeline by writing for them, using different pen names like Big O and Richard Wu at times instead of his real name because, in his own words, the author is the lesser part of creating manga. Now, despite Nagasaki being a part of almost every form of manga creation, he isn't an artist, he's a writer and an editor. So to him, whether a series is successful and popular with readers is based on the artist's ability to draw compelling art with a strong composition. That the author is just a script writer, and an artist can take that boring script and turn it into something worth reading, while Nagasaki himself prefers to stay low-key and in the shadows, him throwing friendly shade at Takao Saito's Golgo 13, saying that even if his drawing was poor, readers would stick with it since the basic composition was very good. Now, as for Urasawa's manga, he claims that he acts more of just an editor, that Urasawa is still the main idea guy and he's more of a collaborative advisor. Now, that may be true, but considering his name is involved with some of the most famous manga in the last 30 years, I personally think he deserves just as much credit as Urasawa for creating stories that are as compelling as they are batshit insane. And speaking of batshit insane, Billy Bat is one of the wildest rides you can ever fucking take. So, what exactly is it about? Well, before we dive into spoilers, because I feel like a lot of the series is kinda hard to cover without them, let's take a look at the first volume and set up the questions the series is going to ask. The first chapter opens on a full-color comic rendition of the hit series Billy Bat, a Dick Tracy-esque comic that follows the character himself, Billy Bat, running a private detective office when trouble walks in the door. The entire first chapter of the manga being totally devoted to a full-color pulp comic about Billy's adventure. Its story continuing into next week's chapter when the inking starts to stop, the lines get unfinished, and we zoom out from the paper onto our protagonist? Kevin Yamagata, an American-born Japanese comic artist who's the author of the hyper-popular series Billy Bat, a comic starring this wisecracking detective bat who gets into monthly adventures with a cast of animal characters. Kevin's struggling to think of what to write next. And since the year is 1949, a couple of feds bust in to spy on a suspected commie across the street using his window. One of those feds seeing his comic and saying, "Hey, I've seen this before, in Japan," implying that Kevin may have unconsciously stolen Billy Bat's design from his childhood in Japan. Upset that he could potentially be a thief, something his values are directly against, Kevin books a flight to Tokyo in hopes of finding some answers. And he does! Kevin quickly learning that his cartoon bat seems to have some kind of presence here. People praying to a drawing of it on the walls outside, seeming to treat it like some kind of god. The bat itself looking just like his Billy Bat. And if that wasn't enough, Kevin blacks out after a drink from a suspicious bartender and wakes up with a body in front of him. Dudes walking into the room and accusing him of the murder, but also offering to help cover it up. Things moving so fast from one wild event to another, Kevin ends up agreeing to dump the body, him throwing it on some train tracks and making it look like a suicide, hopefully freeing him from any suspicion and letting him resume his Billy hunt. Except, this was Sadanori Shimoyama, the real-life president of the Japanese National Railways who, in a famous real incident, was mysteriously found dead on some train tracks after he announced that 30,000 jobs were about to be cut, with big theories about who did it and why still filling Japan's history books to this day. This being the case, Kevin is now wanted for questioning by American feds, them seemingly not interested in the murder of Shimoyama itself, but more so the character of Billy Bat. Some of the comic's manuscripts depicting Billy as a conductor in a train hitting something on the tracks. Them drawn well before this whole ordeal by a Japanese manga artist who's been drawing the same Billy Bat as Kevin, with these future events all drawn down by that artist happening exactly how they are playing out to Kevin. So with all of this being said, is that comic predicting the future? Who's the original artist? What does Billy himself have to do with this murder and godlike reverence from the locals? What did the man in the hat mean about a white and black bat? And to top the volume off, what the fuck is a drawing of Billy doing up here on the moon? From here, the story goes down an extremely wild and honestly unpredictable path that pulls from every major conspiracy theory since forever, wrapping them all up in a decade-spanning adventure where the fate of humanity lies in the hands of comic artists following the lead of a cartoon bat. It featuring people like Einstein, JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald, Jesus Christ, Hitler, not Walt Disney, and many more historical figures. But before we fully dive into this plot and what I think Urasawa and Nagasaki were trying to say at the core of the manga, let's talk first about the structure of the series, how Urasawa ties the mystery together with his signature art style and unstoppable pacing. So this isn't going to be a groundbreaking statement, but it's a pretty well-known fact that when it comes to manga art, one of the most significant and unique styles out there is drawn by Naoki Urasawa. It largely being known for the diverse and realistic focus on facial features and ethnic backgrounds. Most of the manga I've covered so far on this channel are series that I praise endlessly for having big, flashy, extreme art styles that fill pages and make me want to post them on Twitter going monkey mode with hype. But with Urasawa, it's a way different beast. Him choosing to focus his style not on large spreads with wild and loose art, but much more minute-to-minute dialogue boxes where the focus is on both the facial features of the character in frame and how the scene continually reacts to the events unfolding in it. Things like big noses, varying types of eye and head shapes, realistic weight on characters' bodies. His style is focused on the believability of the character as a real person and not so much as a total cartoon. But on the reverse of that, with Billy Bat he has his usual style, but there's also the actual comic art of Billy Bat itself, the comic of the story. It drawn like a classic 1940s American serial, full of goofy gags and comedic violence that is created by the different artists of the series. And the way Urasawa is able to have this mixture of both styles in the story adds this whole extra layer of depth when it comes to the comic of Billy Bat. You actually being able to read it along with its fans. And it's just cool as hell, honestly. The entire first chapter was done in this style, like I had said. And despite it not going over too well with readers at first in Japan, I think it's really awesome and sets up the manga in a way to let you know right up in the front of the story that Billy himself is just as important as all the other wild shit going on. Mixing with that shifting art style and those facial features, he lays them out on the page spread between small shots of movement or action. Things like the camera zooming in on a character's eyes panel after panel as they get bigger in fear. Urasawa being a master of the page turn, building the reader's suspense as the page ends so the flip into a broad and extreme scene hits way harder, it almost feeling like a jump scare in a movie at times. And honestly, that's a quality of Urasawa's style that I feel is really important. The flow of his art and how it mixes with the scene itself. There's a moment where Kevin Goodman, a character we'll talk about later, is walking around the Disney, Culkin mansion alone. A giant estate that's got huge gardens, large decorative statues, multiple winding pathways to follow, and each shot is just a small bit of scenery and movement as Kevin wanders the grounds and takes in the surroundings, him eventually finding a hidden building full of old Billy Bat manuscripts. going through them silently before accidentally noticing an old man just sitting in the darkness at a drawing table. Now, this scene isn't like the most important moment in the series, visually or otherwise, but it's just a perfect example of the natural and comfortable cohesion between panels that Urasawa's composition lets you flow between, feeling like Kevin is actually wandering around a massive mansion ground, and then pulling out a shocking revelation to top it all off. This flow state is something Urasawa has mastered in all of his manga that I've read, both Monster and Big Time and 20th Century Boys, which will get a video one day. And it creates something that's kind of unlike any other artist with his style. That being that his manga feel like you're reading a movie. I know that's a hard concept to totally grasp, I get it, but reading his stories feel like I'm watching a movie from the 70s to 80s. That scene of Kevin wandering around feeling like something out of Escape from New York. Snake silently walking the busted up streets and taking in this hellhole the city had become, without even having to say a word. Urasawa's scene layout in general is something that's just fun to follow, like there's a natural readability to his drawings that give plenty of detail while staying short and sweet. This scene of Billy in his Twin Peaks red room running from door to door trying to make contact through any of his usual mediums, and the movements between them make it feel like Billy is running around frantically in his Billy room, yelling at both an infinite void and the reader themselves. Following that up, the way dialogue and information is exchanged between characters feels delivered like a movie, knowing when to be slow and methodic, but also fast and hectic. The general page layouts being composed, drawn, and written so well that they build more suspense than most horror manga I've read. And with that idea, one of the biggest strengths of Billy Bat comes from the nature of the story itself, is that its genre is kind of everything. It's a mystery, it's got horror, crime, romance, ninjas, politics, science fiction, war stories, American pulp comics, religion, like you name it, it's here somehow. And since Urasawa is able to master that movie-like structure in his manga, Billy Bat feels like a series that is able to be everything at once and somehow stick its landing, blending every possible story element together to create an experience in its plot that's unlike anything else. Like, what other series has a character threaten to travel back in time and murder someone's parents so they're never born? Them saying he learned about that ability from fucking Albert Einstein, to which Einstein himself confirms. The level of jaw drops in this manga are second to none, and to really talk about why Billy Bat's insanity is something that's not only cool as shit, but it also runs deep to the core of humanity itself with the importance of storytelling, I gotta spoil some stuff. At first, I'm going to try and keep it as light as possible, just talking about characters and how they fit into the overall narrative and structure of the story. And before I really go in with the actual ending and what I think Urasawa and Nagasaki want to say with Billy Bat, I'll warn you for big final spoils. Cool? So, Billy Bat, like I have said, is largely about conspiracy. The idea that we aren't being told the whole truth and what's real and what's fake gets hard to define. But in this story, it takes these ideas and blends them in with historical events to have all been shaped and plotted out by Billy Bat himself, a comic book character. Him popping out of the pages to taunt and guide the cast of the story and the flow of history itself. In a way, Billy is an arbiter of fate, someone who seemingly knows how the future is going to play out and tries to affect the coming events by using people as pawns. Going back to literal ancient times, Billy was first seen coming down in a flash from the moon to a cave, with Billy himself only having a single instruction for the caveman: draw. Pick up a pen, a stick, a rock, whatever, and draw. Draw what exactly? Well, everything. Throughout history, Billy appears in front of artists, explorers, wayward souls, giving them roundabout instructions and guidance to future events, using manga and comic artists over time to draw stories starring him that tell of those events. Things that the artist should have no knowledge of, it just came to them. The ideas appeared in their heads and had to be written down because they were so interesting. Them going on to sell millions of copies and launch both the artists and the name Billy Bat into stardom. So, that said, you would think an artist might use this ability that Billy has given them to control the future, to prevent or cause tragic events and possibly propel themselves to the top of the world, right? Well, it's not that simple, especially when you consider that back in Jesus' time, Judas was friends with two separate bats as a kid. Them arguing with each other about who's the white bat and the black one, who the kid should and shouldn't trust. Judas wondering if these bats are God, to which they kinda give a non-committal answer and move on from. Judas going on to grow up and eventually meet Jesus Christ himself, the Messiah taking a stick and drawing in the sand the face of God. Of course, being the drawing of Billy Bat that Kevin had seen in Tokyo, the same drawing the cavemen had painted on the walls, the same drawing that was on the moon. So, does that mean Billy is God? Why are there two Billys, and is one possibly the devil? And years later, when the famous ninjas of the Iga clan are tasked with protecting an ancient scroll that could control the fate of the world, why is Billy popping out of it and warning the ninjas about 9/11 while using American slang, saying that if this scroll fell into the wrong hands, then the world's fucked? So, is he God? Or is this scroll, and by extension Billy himself, just a tool to be used? Is Billy deciding fate, or just telling people what's naturally in store for the world? These are the questions that plague the entire cast of Billy Bat, both on the sides of justice and on the ones focused purely on personal gain. And I feel like these individual struggles between the characters and the chaos that Billy brings are where the real core of the story is found. It all culminating in a pretty clear message from Billy, Urasawa, and Nagasaki. Throughout his adventure, Kevin Yamagata meets tons of people who have been affected by Billy Bat in different ways, both the character itself and the comic he's created. And who better to use as an example than one of my favorite cast members in the manga, Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who allegedly killed JFK before he was shot a few days later in police custody. Now, Oswald was an interesting person, him having ties to Soviet Russia after being banned from the US, eventually being allowed re-entry with his wife before possibly going on to do what he was famous for in Dallas. Him allegedly also shooting a Texas judge through his dining room window just months earlier. Now, this assassination is already one of the most disputed pieces of American history. There's tons of theories on who shot from where and why it was done. But Urasawa and Nagasaki take Oswald and turn him into one of the most sympathetic and relatable characters that you'd want to root for. A person who's been beaten down by the world around him, wanting to do good, wanting to be more than just a cog in the machine, wanting to be a hero, offering to be a spy for multiple governments, and him being taken advantage of over and over by the people seeking Billy Bat, brainwashing him and turning him into a pawn they can toss aside when they complete their mission, gaslighting him into believing everything he does is in the name of justice, all because Oswald just wants to be a hero. Only to eventually find Kevin drawing him in the manuscripts as Oswald the Bunny, someone who's being set up as a presidential killer, a pawn in a much larger game. Oswald knows he's doing the wrong things. He just wants to be a hero. He wants to make a difference. He wants to do good, but just doesn't know how. It's with the influence of Billy that he is turned around, that he doesn't take the shot, and that he spent his last free moments helping save an innocent girl. The writer duo confirming that Oswald did not kill Kennedy. And as he's taken down by police after being told by Billy Bat directly that he did a good job, that history may paint him as a villain, but he was in fact a hero. He's able to smile and have faith that he made the right choice. His wife was thrown into hell by Billy Bat and has a tragic ending just a few days later. But because of that same bat and the fate laid out for him, he became the hero he wanted to be. He kept the legacy of Billy moving forward so Kevin Goodman could eventually be born. Ben Gibbard from fucking Death Cab and the Postal Service said it best in the song Sleeping In. He was just a man with something to prove. Saw them in concert a few weeks ago. Shit whipped ass. Anyway, it's obvious that Billy Bat is something that comes into people's lives and shakes them up, both in good ways and awful ones. Sometimes he tells you information that can seemingly save the day, while he can also say some shit that might possibly end the world. There's two bats, both a good one and a bad one, or at least so people have been told. But how can you ever know which is which when they sure ain't gonna tell you? All you can do is wonder if their instructions were helpful or hurtful. Going back to Judas, he obviously betrayed Jesus, that's how the story goes. Except here, Jesus told Judas that he needed to die, that it was for the good of the world. Jesus himself telling Judas to sell him out, with Judas only listening because Billy had told him to. He thought Billy was God, and now he had sold out the Messiah himself, a person he loved. Billy just telling him that he did exactly as he was told. Jesus died for the sins of humans, but was it at the will of Billy? Was it the will of God or a devil? Billy Bat is ultimately a comic book character. He's someone created, written, and drawn to entertain readers, to tell a story, and honestly, be a vessel for artists to express themselves with. Starting with Jesus, he was, well, Jesus. You know the story. He died for humanity and became a beacon for people to live their lives under. So in that thought process, did Billy have Jesus killed so he could become that beacon? One that exists to guide people down a better path? This idea, this connection Billy seemingly wants to create between people, feels like what the story is really about. The idea that a fucking comic book character can bring us all together in a way that people live better. Throughout both of the original artist Kevin Yamagata's and his successor Kevin Goodman's lives, either we, the readers, or the characters themselves meet tons of people whose stories have stuck with them, impacted them, and in a lot of cases, changed their lives for the better. Across the timeline of the series, it's spanning from literal cavemen to the 2060s, Billy Bat brings the people of the world together. Race, nationality, none of that shit matters when it comes to Billy Bat. Everyone is just a fan who wants to talk about their favorite chapters, the best characters. Shit, it's due to the power of Kevin Yamagata's Billy in the first place that Kevin Goodman was even born. A car ornament of Billy guiding a cab driver through crowds protesting segregation, also he could help save an interracial marriage. That same marriage being what goes on to create Kevin Goodman, the successor to Billy Bat. The fates of everyone involved always seemingly tied up with Billy's motives. This is also really cool in my opinion. It's extremely ballsy to not even introduce who's considered to be the real protagonist until volume 12 out of 20. Kevin Goodman being a teen of the 80s and painting his artwork in a graffiti style that not only looks cool as hell, shows off yet another form of drawing that Urasawa can just whip out and master on a whim. The writer-author-editor duo obviously have a lot they want to say about racial and societal issues, and they use Billy Bat as their vehicle to explore them. That same interracial couple getting trapped in a town that's run by the KKK, the police themselves burning an innocent black man alive, and the couple being forced to confront how much hatred this world has for their relationship, and how hopelessly tall that wall dividing us can feel. But just like how he parted the crowd of racist protesters, Billy goes on to spread joy to everyone that his comics can reach, connecting them all at a level anyone can understand each other with. The power of storytelling and artwork cutting through all the bullshit and mattering the most. But What happens when these people that follow the other Bat, the Billy that supposedly tells you fucked up information for an unknown reason, it teasing people with the ability to turn back time itself and rewrite any mistakes you had made in your life, whether it was causing the deaths of your parents, losing the girl who would save you from becoming a heartless killer, or possibly even major historical events themselves. Every nation and secret society of the world all wanting control over the power of Billy Bat, the power to sway people's hearts. And among all of these people who would use Billy for their own interests is Chuck Culkin, a capitalist entrepreneur who takes the world over using Billy Bat himself. And if you still care about spoilers, this is probably your last place to bail out from. So, it's no secret to people who have read Billy Bat, but Chuck Culkin, the person who effectively steals Billy from Kevin Yamagata, is obviously meant to be Walt Disney. After Kevin left his drawing job to search Japan for Billy Bat at the start of the manga, the comic was sold out to a capitalist businessman going by the name Chuck Culkin, him appearing from nowhere with infinite money and buying the rights to Billy Bat, turning the popular comic series into a worldwide phenomenon that is an obvious parallel to Disney and Mickey Mouse, Chuck having stolen the comic from Kevin and taken his assistant to work for him, the real Chuck Culkin, with this famous Chuck not even having a real known name. He's just the dude who made all of this happen. And as the enterprise grows and Billy becomes the most famous thing in the world, Chuck's empire becomes an unstoppable juggernaut of a company, buying out the competition they can and killing the ones they can't. Lee Oswald is, like I had said, drawn by Kevin as a rabbit, paralleling Oswald the Rabbit, the original concept for Mickey Mouse before Disney took off and created a character that he could own all the rights to. And to push the obvious parallels further, there's the classic conspiracy that Walt Disney himself had ties with the Nazis. And whether that's legit or not, Urasawa and Nagasaki sure went in on it, Chuck being sent over from Germany by Hitler himself to spread the legend of Billy Bat, to make him the most famous thing in the world, and he did. Chuck went to America and spread the Billy name worldwide. He became famous, rich, and powerful, all thanks to the drawings of Billy Bat, his Billy Bat, the two Chucks Billy, and not either of the Kevins, the Culkin Billy's face being much more cuter and a bit more shallow when compared to the shit-eating smirk the real Billy has. And despite this comic literally making Disney, Culkin Enterprises the biggest company in the world, them having sway in global politics because the prospect of getting a Disneyland, Billyland, drives tourism and revenue up so high that it's just an infinite cash cow. Bro, this manga started in 2008 and ended in 2016, and these two dudes perfectly predicted the path Disney has taken and the giant they've become. This company's growth culminates with the final arc of the manga, the series jumping further and further into the future as Culkin Enterprises basically becomes the global government under the direction of a new CEO, Timmy, the bastard son of Chuck Culkin, who drew Billy Bat so well that he effectively lied and convinced Kevin and everyone else that he could see Billy the same as them, that he was the next successor, despite spending his childhood drawing Billy as a Nazi with his skinhead friends, a thing both of the Kevin's Billy would never do. Billy Bat under Timmy has sold billions and turned the company into the new UN, them having Billylands in every major country that can offer you permanent Billyland citizenship, guaranteeing your safety from the inevitable collapse of society, with Culkin Enterprises having almost total control of the world's water supply. Chuck and Timmy's Billy, despite being a figure more famous than God, has the opposite effect of the Kevin's Billy. It was a comic full of war and combat that divided nations, not noir hard-boiled hijinks of a goofy cartoon shit-talking bat. Instead of bringing people together, the end of the world is here. The few humans still living seemingly locked in a pointless war between nations for what resources are left. Everyone living at the total mercy of Culkin Enterprises. Throughout history, People have seen Billy, have searched for Billy, have killed for Billy. But it's the ones who have no personal gain in their heart that end up taking what Billy says and doing their best to protect the future, while the people who just cared about fixing their own lives all make the choices that sent the world further into hell. Albert Einstein himself telling a curious manga artist that, parallel dimensions exist where endless possibilities are played out, where scenario B happened instead of A, and Billy offers these selfish people a chance to seemingly go to that alternate world, to reverse time for a person and save them from themselves. Except, doing this destroys these dimensions, and after so many people have done this through time, this universe and this Earth is the last one left. There's no more do-overs. If the battle for Billy is lost by someone who doesn't seek justice, then the world's kaput. The artists of the series all drawing a similar future where a young boy is surrounded by bodies in a desert wasteland. The white and black Billies literally fighting with each other because one thinks humanity is fucking dumb and should be taken out, and the other saying that even if they are dumb, they can do cool shit sometimes. Also, there's straight up a third Billy who implies that he was like a meteor that killed the dinosaurs and it split into 3 parts, leaving the black and white ones on Earth while he was the one up on the moon. To which Kevin Goodman just cuts him off and says, "I do not need an explanation and neither do the readers, fuck that. Just tell me how to save the world." But all of that random last minute lore aside, this is both why these groups want Billy's power and why Billy has used all of these artists and just people who can hear him to fight back against them. Because existence itself is on the line, the white and black Billies both guiding everyone to the endpoint that the Earth has reached. Hitler regretted the person he became and wanted to go back to art school in hopes of rewriting his life. Hatman Kurisu wanted to go back to the Great Earthquake of Kanto in 1923 so he could save his family and possibly be a normal person. And these people became literal demons to find that power, throwing innocent lives into the fire for their own gains, with Timmy at the end bringing the world to its slow death. But it's in the middle of this dying world where Urasawa and Nagasaki's message comes through the loudest, with the final few chapters of the series, them following a soldier as he wanders into a wiped out town, locking eyes with a troop from a rival country and both of them pointing their guns towards each other. Problem is, they've both happened to step on a landmine each, leaving them trapped as they stand and stare each other down, fingers on each of their triggers. Knowing this situation is pretty much hopeless, one of the soldiers throws his jacket off and reveals that he's wearing a Billy Bat shirt. Shocked, the rival troop takes his jacket off, revealing the same Billy shirt, them both agreeing that Kevin Goodman is the real Billy, that the Culkin shit was just missing the same heart. One of the soldiers actually having the very final issue of Billy Bat, the conclusion to the Curse of the Pharaoh, one of the Billy stories that's been referenced multiple times in the series. And despite these soldiers coming from rival countries, one tosses the comic to the other, letting him see the conclusion to one of his favorite stories, the love of this comic being way more important than their pointless battle. And to double the point down, a boy wakes up in the sea of bodies when he hears people talking about Billy Bat, him staggering towards them in a daze from dehydration, just like that panel that the Kevins had predicted all of this time, causing the soldiers to use the only remaining water they have and risk stepping off of those landmines to save that kid's life. Now that he's watered down and back to breathing, the kid is able to read the conclusion, same as the soldiers, those two troops giving up on the fight and instead helping each other out of the minefield. The kid loudly proclaiming that he has a dream, he has a wish, and it's all written down in this comic. The ending of the Pharaoh's curse showing Billy and the gang saving a kid who would go on to one day save the world. The real kid himself inspired by this comic and hopefully one day saving humanity itself. Despite the hell he lives in, he has a dream, he has hope. And it was passed down to him by the artists, the stories that came before, the wishes of the people that poured their hearts into Billy Bat. And I think this is what Urasawa and Nagasaki really want to say. Looking at the countless examples I've shown off, it's obvious that the actual stories of Billy Bat affect both the people and the world around them, in good and bad ways. But when written with real heart and passion, they bring people together. They cross borders, boundaries, and ideals to find common ground. And this is obviously a parallel to our real life stories, the ones passed down from older generations, the movies, books, comics, manga, anime, and games that we all bond together with. This is a personal detour, but back in 2016, I started dating my now fiancée. And outside of seeing some DBZ, Pokemon, and Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid, she had no real exposure to anime and let alone manga. Me, being a big-ass weeb who spent all of my free time watching anime or playing video games, I tried to hide my power level and keep that shit under wraps for as long as I could. But to make a long story short, one day she walked in and I was watching Mob Psycho 100, her seeing Mob pop the fuck off and all of the insane colors, animation, and combat. Her saying, "The fuck is this? This looks pretty cool." And now, 8 years later, we have a 3,000 plus volume manga and comic collection. We play tons of new games together and watch seasonal anime. I fucking rewatched all of Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece up to episode 800-ish just to experience those stories again with her. We've bonded and connected through all of these stories that we love, and this isn't even exclusive to just us. Recently, the dude himself, Akira Toriyama, unfortunately passed away, and despite the obvious tragedy this is, it was really heartwarming in a way to see just how much of an outpouring of love came from the entire world. Like, just because of the stories he created and the characters he drew, Toriyama became an international hero and global treasure that whole nations felt the loss of. And Billy Bat, despite its insane plotline with every single conspiracy being true because Billy did it, is about connecting with each other through that same love. And maybe it's just me, but it makes this series something so special in my eyes. Sure, it's wild, over the top, and toys with history at will. It jumps around in time periods and can get kind of confusing to follow sometimes. But it does all of this with such a fun and intentful meaning that it makes the legacy of Billy and the two Kevins one that's gonna stay in my brain forever. How could it not with every single wacky ass plotline the series pulls off? And for those exact insane plot reasons, things like JFK, Jesus, the moon landing being faked, Hitler's redemption idea, Disney ruling the world, a comic bat doing 9/11, and plenty more, this series will probably never have an official English release. It just ain't gonna happen in my opinion. But I wouldn't want this story to be created and written in any other way. There's just nothing like Billy Bat. And even if Monster or 20th Century Boys will always be the more popular two, this cartoon fucker here will always have a special place in my heart. Thanks for watching, hopefully this video made sense. It's the weirdest manga I've had to edit together and write about, so feedback is extremely welcome. Did this all flow out on whatever? We'll see. Like, comment, sub to help me out, peep the Patreon like these dope ass people right here, and I'll see you next time with whatever's next.